And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Sir David Attenborough. Thank you for listening. Hello.
Hello.
This week, I have been reading a book by Sir David Attenborough called Life on Air.
So have I.
Good. So I found this in the thrift shop. Look, the sticker is still on it.
Yes, £1.50.
What a bargain.
A bargain for that much life.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So we should just say at the beginning that this is a book called Life on Air, and it's about his broadcasting career.
Yeah, but essentially it is his autobiography because he spent his entire life on air.
Yes, truth. Yeah.
Okay, it kind of skips through the first 24 years. You get a little idea of who he was when he was a kid.
Yeah, he refers back to it, but he was just like a little David Attenborough.
I was going to say, all he was when he was a kid is an unemployed David Attenborough.
Yeah.
It was an amateur, became professional.
Yeah, the child was the man he turned out to be,
was,
for sure.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
Little collector of fossils.
Yeah. What did you think of David Attenborough before you read this book?
Living legend, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone loves him. And him pushing to go to these places that people have never been actually has brought us information that we might have never known. And now he's just like everyone's godfather.
Yeah, I think about him almost, he's almost like the Queen in a way, in the fact that he's always been there. I think he's like 87 now. And because
he's
he was
97.
What?
Yes.
Oh my word.
And he's still out there.
You're right, he's 97.
Yes.
Wow. And because he was there at the birth of television, it's like he's literally been in all of our homes since the beginning of time.
He has.
But unusually, most people on TV get embroiled in some kind of scandal or something where their careers are over or David Attenborough's never had that.
No, he's had one wife and kids and this career.
We, as a nation, we just adore, as a world, we adore him. He's huge in America. Yeah, we love David. Okay.
Launch into this 97-year career.
Wow.
It's a big old read, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Fascinating.
Yes.
Absolutely fascinating.
He was born in 1926.
That was a long time ago.
A long time ago. I don't think that's actually in the book. I had to Google it because he starts at age 24 in 1950. Mind you could do the maths.
His dad was a principal at a college, right? So he grew up basically on a university campus.
Yes.
Which is why he's just super intelligent.
Yeah. He also says that because of the university, I think he started collecting things. I think he had a room there that he could use or something.
Oh, okay. He's collecting fossils and
all sorts of stuff.
And he had tropical fish and stuff when he was a kid. He was just well into it from an early age.
He loved it all. He was fascinated by everything.
There was a zoology department in the university.
Yeah.
And they needed a constant supply of newts. And little David Attenborough would collect the newts and sell them to the zoology department out of a pond right next door to their building. So he's a little nature boy, isn't he?
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, still is.
Yeah, because he met Gerald Durrell on one of his travels, and that was a hero to him.
Oh, yeah. What I'm loving about this book is that all the famous natural history people just keep cropping up.
Yeah,
it's like, there's so few of them. Yeah, they all revolve in the same sphere.
Yeah,
They're all,
that sphere being the world.
The world. The natural world.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's not many famous natural historians, is there?
No.
Noah?
No. Noah was the original.
Yeah.
Actually, he really was. Collected the animals two by two. I accidentally nailed it.
He studied at Cambridge, right? Natural sciences. And then he went into the Navy because he thought he would get travel. He really wanted to travel the world. And he was excited about that, but they posted him to the Firth of Forth. And that's where he went, so that he was really demoralised. And then he went into publishing. Yeah. And again, he thought in natural sciences, he thought he would travel, but he didn't.
Yeah, he was saying it's boring.
And then BBC Radio had a talks department and a job came up. So he applied for a job and he wasn't successful. But a bit later, a woman who worked there, Mary Adams, found his CV and they were just starting television. And she thought, he might be a good candidate to come and work in television. So she got him in for an interview.
And it was not presenting. It was just working.
Yeah.
He was an intern.
There was no job. There was a training course. And she said, do you want to come on? Because obviously television is in its infancy. Yeah. So they need to train people. And there was a training course. And he's like, I've got a job. I can't. He's married with a kid.
At that point, yeah.
And he's like, I can't give up the job, as boring as it is, for a 3-month training course, and she said it's £1,000 for the, and he's like, that's double what I earn in a year
for training.
Yeah, so he did it. David Attenborough didn't own a TV set when he went for the job at the BBC, and then when Mary Adams called him back and said, do you want to come over and try in television? He'd only ever watched one programme, which was at his wife's parents' house.
I think that's really important, actually, that he just really didn't watch TV. He'd almost never seen it. So he wasn't intimidated at all by it. So he walked in there, and for ages he was just doing the practical stuff, doing the sound and all that sort. What was he doing? It
was a training course, and what they did, there was about 12 people on it, and they all had different areas of expertise. So there was like music and sports, and David was like natural sciences because that was his qualification. And then just by pure chance, near the end of his training course, they found I'm not going to pronounce this right, but they found a coelacanth.
Yes.
It's a fossilized fish, anyway. Was dredged up out of... Okay, does it look like a cornetto?
This morning, because... No, that's a coelacanth.
That's it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, right, because I'd spelt it wrong. It's a type of fish that developed feet, and they probably think it's the clearest link to evolution.
Oh.
Because when they actually examine this fish, it's closer to reptiles than it is fish. So it's probably the fish that developed into...
So you pronounce it coelacanth?
Yes.
Okay, coelacanth. I'm just going to go back and
it's
edit
a weird-looking fish.
Correctly.
It's kind of got 3 fins at the bottom, and you could imagine it
scuttling
sprouting
along,
legs and walking out of the ocean.
Okay, well, one of these was found, dredged up out of the sea, come to the attention of the BBC, and Mary Adams thought, this will make a great little segment. And so they got a biologist in, and they needed someone to produce it. And because that was David's area of expertise, they got him on. They did a little 10-minute segment about the coelacanth, and it was great. And Mary Adams was very impressed. And then she offered David Attenborough a 6-month contract with the BBC to be an assistant producer.
That's right.
And that's how it got started.
That's the beginning of his lifetime.
Thanks to an old fossil fish.
Yes.
Before the training started, one of the earliest programmes on the BBC was something called Joan Gilbert's Weekend Diary. And she wanted to bring in, I think, her boyfriend or something to co-present. And Mary Adams put the knockers on that and said, I've had this young man who came in for an interview, David Attenborough. He could be a good partner for you. So they got him in. So before he started training, they actually pulled in David Attenborough to co-present on the Joan Gilbert show. And of course, no training or anything. He was just thrust straight in front of the camera. And he had to interview this runner who just gave him monosyllabic answers. And it basically ended as soon as it began. And it went straight back and Joan Gilbert took over. Anyway, he was never asked back. Like, his presenting career was already over before it began. And he said 5 decades later, the producer who worked on that show was retiring. And David Attenborough was chosen to do the speech at his retirement. And in order to prepare the speech, they gave him the files of this man's career, and they found a note from Joan Gilbert, and it says this: David Attenborough is intelligent and promising and may well be producer material, but he's not to be used again as an interviewer because his teeth are too big.
That's ridiculous.
That's
ridiculous.
That.
Maybe his head grew after that. And it all just got the right proportions.
She just didn't want him. She wanted her boyfriend to
co-present.
That's
right.
Yeah. But I love that. She actually wrote that message. His teeth are too big for TV.
And he's so handsome, it's ridiculous. Yeah. What a daft thing to say.
Yeah.
Oof.
That's one thing we should point out. David Attenborough was a very handsome man.
Very handsome man.
I kind of thought that when he was going around all of these places, asking if he could go to places nobody had ever been before, everybody seemed to be completely charmed by him. And I also thought, oh, wow, it's because he's so good looking as well. That
will help. But he's also obviously a very gentle and lovely man. He really comes across that way anyway.
Mm-hmm. And he's super good looking.
Yeah. It does help.
Yeah, when you look like that, most people say yes to you, don't they?
I wouldn't know.
So he's an assistant producer at the BBC in the talks department, which is basically all of their non-fiction output. So they're grappling with all the new technology, and it's going out live. They have no way of recording it.
I know, as the technology changes, he always reports the changes through this whole book, but in these early days, he's saying the lamps that they lit the studio with were so hot that when they had live animals in, it was a nightmare because it's too hot for the animals usually. He talks about how they had a geese herder. Oh, this bloke who could talk to geese.
Talk to geese, yeah.
So whenever they had anything like this, they had to bring them to the studio with the handler, and then they would all be sweating hot. And then these one geese projectiles shatter over the handler when he was bending down trying to talk to the geese. He had to get a handkerchief out and wipe himself, and then just out of being flustered because it was live TV, he blew his nose.
Oh my God, that's disgusting.
And they continued the interview with a smear across his face.
It's a good job it wasn't recorded. That man would never have lived it down.
That's true. Live TV. It's there's loads of stories like that in those early days. It's mayhem.
And also, the first TV cameras, they couldn't actually see what they were pointing the camera at. There was a lot of guesswork. It wasn't until later they got the little monitor where they could see what they were pointed at. So they were winging it, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, not many had a TV set at this point. TV wasn't on all day long. It was just on for a couple of hours in the afternoon.
Yeah, we're in 1954, so when was the Queen's coronation? 53? Because that was when loads of the nation got a TV set to watch that. From that point on, there was a lot more people watching TV. It was taking off. Yeah, he said at this point, TV went off after school. It was on in the day, then it went off after school and came back on at 7:30 to 11 p.m.
Yeah, it was all live. And they said quite often, programmes, if there was problems, programmes would overrun. He said it was just a bit erratic.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Yeah, the guide was only a guide.
Yeah, but he also said that what happened, if a programme was overrunning and getting quite boring, people would actually phone the channel and say to them, this is getting a bit boring now, can you wrap it up and get on to the next programme? Isn't that mad?
Yeah.
It sounds like in the early days, of course, they didn't know what they were doing. They were they were literally finding out on the job.
Yeah.
Oh, as well, when they used to present the TV when it was on for a couple of hours a night, BBC announcers used to have like a suit and a tie, and the ladies would be in evening dress and stuff.
Nuts.
And they used to talk, of course, they all used to talk like that.
Yeah.
Do you have a BBC voice?
No.
Let's do the whole of the podcast in a BBC voice.
Yeah, you have to talk like the Queen.
Yes.
Queen's English.
So the early shows that he had as a producer were studio based, and they would bring the animals into the studio, and it kind of wasn't really working.
Well, you're not learning so much because you're not seeing them in their natural habitat. So it's partly he wanted the adventures, but partly he really wanted to learn more about the animals, how they naturally behave. So he managed to wangle a trip to Sierra Leone. That was their first.
That was through a guy called Jack Lester who worked at the London Zoo. He worked in the reptile house, and he would come to some of the early programmes and bring the animals in. And him and David Attenborough struck up a real friendship. Because Jack Lester would go on behalf of London Zoo to get the animals, David's like, well, this is a really good opportunity to film
you can show us
getting them. And he used to live in Sierra Leone, which is why it was an obvious choice to go to, first of all, when nobody really knew what they were doing. So yeah, off they went.
And he was saying in those days the camera wasn't good enough to film in anything other than really bright light.
Yeah.
And so in the dark forest they just couldn't really capture almost anything. So they ended up spending more time collecting animals and then filming the collecting of the animals.
Mm-hmm. I think as well they cheated it. Like they were saying that the whole premise was they were filming Jack finding and capturing the animals. Yeah. So I think there was a lot of Jack diving into long grass. They could film that. Yeah. And then they'd make out that he'd caught the animal. But is this the bit where they go into the cave with all the bats? And they realise it's too dark in there to film. Yeah. And they have a couple of flares with them. Oh my God. So they thought it was a good idea to light a flare.
In a bat cave.
In a bat cave, which of course caused absolute mayhem, and they couldn't film anyway because even though the flare lit up the cave, there was just so much smoke. But it just shows that even at this point, it was the first time they were doing anything.
All firsts, yeah.
And with equipment that wasn't capable of doing what they wanted to do. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But I imagine in the early days of television, where you never saw anything like that, it was probably hugely exciting to sit at home and just see some footage from Sierra Leone anyway.
Exactly. And that's when Jack got ill, so David Attenborough had to fill in for him as a presenter. And then, sadly, he died of a tropical disease not long after that.
They don't know what the
47.
disease was. Yeah, it was a complete mystery. But he obviously picked something up when they were in abroad.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Jack Lester died. And by that time, because David Attenborough had been covering for him, it was just the natural successor. Then actually he was in front of the camera now because he presented more of that programme than Jack ever did. And people were recognising David Attenborough on the street as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of how he got in to being the main natural history presenter at the BBC, was because the guy they originally had got ill and died.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what I learned in this book. I thought he was a presenter, and I know he's really knowledgeable about everything, but I didn't realise how much he was behind making all these programmes happen. So even when he's presenting, he's still the one suggesting things. He's actually going to these countries and having conversations with the heads of state, trying to get permission, meeting tribesmen. When they capture these animals, he's massively involved in feeding them and caring for them. I mean, it's so nice after reading Barnum and how these animals are just scooped up, taken, not treated properly because there's no knowledge, obviously, and they were just dying, and they'd send for some more giraffes or some more whales and get some more. They were really, really caring about these animals. He himself was nurturing and caring and with the knowledge of each one. There's so many things that are so poignant in this. Like there's a bird that has got an amazing way of repeating sounds. It's like a parrot does.
Oh my God, have you seen that footage? That's the thing I loved about this book, is that some of the stuff that he's talking about, I've seen the footage, from watching his programmes over the years, hearing about him seeing that bird that was even mimicking the camera they were using.
Yes.
I mean, that's insane.
But it was saying one of the tragedies was that it was mimicking the sound of the forest being cut down. The chainsaws. It could mimic the chainsaws, which were the sound of its own doom. I know, but then people like him have helped bring to our attention the tragedies of our planet and what we're doing, and things like the people who are hunting gorillas for souvenirs for tourists. He bringing that to the attention of the world. I mean, it's everybody, every single human on this planet is responsible for what they're doing. Another massive thing I've learned through this book is sometimes he studies animals, sometimes he's studying plants, and other times he's studying humans, because all of those things are part of nature, massively including humans, and seeing humans as animals. One of the most fascinating things was, he says, because he talks a lot about gathering sound, especially in the early days when cameras were separate from sound. And he says the ambient sound's really important to gather so they can splice it together later when they're back in the studio. And that wherever they go in the world, they have to make an effort to capture the sound of people and crowds, because people sound different in every country.
Yeah.
And it really made me think that's how you see people as animals, because birds sound different. It's like bird chatter. And if you think of British crowd, because I've been to Liverpool and it's the only time I thought it in real life. In Liverpool, the sound of chatter is different.
Because it's so scouse.
It's more, and there's more laughter. I actually hear more laughter in Liverpool for some reason. That's the first time I ever thought it myself. It's a really good story where when they came back from Africa, one of the sound editors had edited out all the clicks in the group chatter because they thought it was some electronic sound. They didn't realise it was part of the speech of African, so they'd carefully edited out all the click sounds, and he was like, no, that's the sound they make, and he had to put them all back in.
When you see the footage of those people talking like that, it's extraordinary. They're completely different sounds to what we use. Yeah,
and then even if that's just your language, but even if you went to Italy, it might be more, mamma mia, the animation, my American friends has always said that I'm really sing-songy and that Americans are more flat.
Okay.
And we're more up and down. So, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It just reminds me that we are animals. We've got our own sounds. Different species in different areas of the world have our own sounds.
And of course, every time he went to a different area, the people were fascinated with him being a white man. He said that when him and the cameraman would sit down and eat their food, people would gather and they would call everybody over to watch them eating their food because they did it in such a different manner to what they were used to. So they were observing them at the same
as animals,
time.
as different animals.
Yeah. It's fascinating. When you think about it, forget about different countries having different languages. Like you say, just similar countries having different dialects and stuff. It's so particular to a small area.
Yeah.
It is fascinating.
It is, isn't it? But there's a point where London Zoo has asked for an anteater, if they could bring an anteater back because they don't have one. And when they get to this country, there's 12 types.
Wow.
It's the same with humans. Mm-hmm. You know, we're all humans, but there's different types. You know?
Yeah.
We're animals. It's a good thing to acknowledge.
Opposable thumbs.
Yeah.
That is the only thing.
Yeah.
In fact, I learnt that from this book because when he goes to see the gorillas, he says that it's opposable thumbs that make us so similar to them. Now, I thought opposable thumbs were that your right thumb and your left thumb were opposable, but actually it isn't. It's that your thumb is opposable to the fingers on your hand.
Yeah, so you can grip things.
Yeah, and you can make tools and you can make weapons.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why we, the humans, became and took over the world, is because we have opposable thumbs. Mm. Yeah. Opposable thumbs ruined the planet.
Yes.
God made a mistake when he invented opposable thumbs, didn't he?
Oh, it's interesting talking to gorillas. He says at one point that man portrays gorillas as violent and aggressive, but actually it's the other way around. Us who are violent and aggressive.
Yeah.
Are perfectly peaceful. Apart from when they rip apart monkeys to eat or things like that. That's just eating.
That's life.
That's just eating. That's just survival. Right.
They don't have McDonald's.
Yeah.
On one of the trips, they're going to Madagascar, but one of the producers said, can you stop in Nairobi? Because there's this couple, he's a game warden there, and they've been rearing a lion cub. So what happened, it was an orphaned lion cub, the mum had died, and they'd been rearing it themselves, so it kind of had become tame around the game warden and his wife. Now, the wife is Joy Adamson, who wrote a very famous book called Born Free. Have you read it or seen the film
the
or anything?
song, that's all.
Okay. Just what David Attenborough writes in this book about it is completely different to how I remember
I had
the
a
film.
chat to somebody about this because I was in the middle of reading it. So I'm not allowed to talk to you, but I'm allowed to talk to other people. And apparently they romanticised this story in the film.
Wow.
The truth is just
horrendous.
Not a Disney film.
Well, do you know what? It kind of shows why you shouldn't mess with nature too much, actually,
it really
because what
does.
they did, so this lion cub, which they called Elsa, they kind of made it very tame, and then Elsa went out back into the wild and mated with a wild lion, came back, had the cubs. So therefore the cubs were kind of used to humans, which actually is a dangerous thing to occur. And they also said that they would have goats for these cubs and the lion to eat. So there was a cage of goats on the camp. We're in a constant state of fear.
So, they turned up and there's all these goats in a pen just bleating because they're all because there's tigers prowling around them. Yeah, they're constantly waiting to be murdered.
Lions prowling around them.
What did I say?
Tigers.
I mean lions. It's horrible. Yeah, he said there was just an air of violence.
Yeah. David also says in this book that Joy and George are not nice people and that she treats her African staff like shit.
Yes.
They argue all the time.
Yeah, they don't get on with each other, and she's absolutely in love, like weirdly in love with Elsa the top lion.
Right, okay.
And they're rolling around on the floor together and just embracing, and he's saying, this is weird.
Weird. So they stay and film, but not long after they filmed, Elsa, the lioness, dies of tick disease. And then the cubs are obviously becoming a problem because they're big now.
And he said that when you walk past them, they swipe at you, so you have to wear trousers or leather around your lower legs.
A game warden ordered them to be shot because they were becoming a problem. They've been kind of domesticated, but not domesticated. So George traps them and releases them into the desert. Yeah. And him and Joy stay in the desert in tents. And they say, while they're there, these lions keep coming into their tents at night. And they're just assuming they're the cubs. It's just like, oh my God, that's so dangerous.
It's terrible.
Anyway, eventually they were shot, those cubs. And then Joy was then killed by one of her African staff, because it sounds like she was just so awful to them.
She was actually murdered by one of her own staff. And later on, George was...
When they were making the film Born Free, George was training lion cubs to play Elsa at various stages of her life. Yeah. One of them attacked George's assistant and he died. Yeah. And then, the whole thing just...
It's really dark.
Yeah. And then George was...
Killed by bandits.
Yeah. And then it actually turns out The reason they had little Elsa the lion cub in the first place was because George had shot the mother.
Yeah.
Cycle of life.
A cycle of violence.
Yeah, cycle of violence.
Yeah.
They got what they deserved, basically. Yeah. It's extraordinary how that's... I mean, I watched that film probably when I was 7, but I remember it as being a nice film about lions. But it's extraordinary how that was missold. And actually, if anything, it shows why people should not go and interfere at this level with animals. Yeah. Everyone's dead. All the animals are dead.
The animals are dead. The humans are dead. It's so dark. Yeah. It's the exact opposite, apparently, of the film.
Yeah.
They're not born free.
No, they're not born free.
Actually, they should be.
They're free now. R.I.P.
It's really nuts. That story is nuts. It's a classic case of investigating human behaviour and animal behaviour, because all of it is nature.
This is opposable thumbs again. Were it not for opposable thumbs, those lions would just have eaten Joy and George first.
Yeah, they would.
Go. But it's because Joy and George probably
pull a trigger.
Yeah. Give the animals guns and opposable thumbs. How long do we have to wait in evolution for that to happen? So Attenborough, at this point, he's making programmes that we're all loving. He's already National Treasure David Attenborough, National History Man, isn't he?
Yeah.
And that continued for the next 50 years.
Yeah, really, yeah.
So weirdly, at this point, he decides to really step back from his presenting duties on the natural histories, and he goes back to college, well, university.
He's 36, and he probably feels old.
Yeah, right. Well, to be honest, back 50 years ago, 36 was probably considered a bit old, wasn't it?
You know, he's also been doing what he's doing for a long time at that point. So he thought it's about time that he really got the knowledge so that he was qualified to do the job that he's fallen into. It's great. It's good. I really admire him for that.
Yeah, and so he did like 5 years at university. Was it social anthropology or something? But he also was making some programs on the side. It's not like he gave it up completely.
No.
But no, he went to get the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Good on him.
And so he did his studies. And then the BBC said, will you come and be the controller of BBC Two?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
He was really resistant, and they made it clear he wasn't the first choice. She's always nice.
So BBC Two, back in the day, was kind of like the poor relation of BBC One, wasn't it? It was this funny little channel. But it basically was down to David Attenborough going in and shaking it up. Apparently had a really crappy logo and the programmes were really boring, and he just came right in, changed everything, turned it into an eclectic mix of arts.
Yeah, he brought jazz to the television. He brought the big bands over and stuff.
Yeah, and even like Stravinsky.
Yeah, he's the only person to film. The only film of Stravinsky was because he filmed his final tour.
Wow.
And he got snooker put on TV.
When I read that, I thought of you, because I know how much you love snooker.
And he talked about the famous, because it was all black and white TV then. Anybody watching at home wonders where the pink ball is. It's the one next to the brown one, or whatever, something like that. Good old days.
Do you know some of the other programmes that he commissioned, like Call My Bluff, Match of the Day, The Old Grey Whistle Test, Monty Python's Flying Circus?
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, Dave
he commissioned
them. He changed the face of television.
Yeah, he really did.
You kind of think, he's a natural history guy. Actually, I had no idea that he was controller of BBC Two.
It's the same with bringing jazz to the masses. He really is massively influential.
Oh, he said one of the perks of the job of being controller was just being able to leave your office, go down to the studio and hear Duke Ellington and Ella Fitzgerald right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that was a perk.
Fantastic. Yeah, but he made that perk.
Yeah,
happen.
right. Then we have the proliferation of colour television, which obviously changes stuff. Technology's moving along. So he's back out in the field again, and it really does change what they can film, where they can film, how far away they can go. Even things like how long the batteries last in the cameras makes a huge difference to what they can film. And also things like international air travel. You know, a lot of these early shows that he's doing, he's on a boat for a couple of weeks, and then they're going into a canoe and then a real rickety jeep down a dirt track for 3 days.
Boats are sinking. And it's crazy.
Oh, it's a real adventure,
They're stuck without
wasn't
food.
it? Yeah.
All sorts of times he's left stranded. Yeah, a real adventurous life.
Yeah. So he was doing series himself. Like, it wasn't just about animals. He was doing like Civilization, which was about how people inhabited the planet and the art and the social stuff. And I think the things we've talked about already in this podcast, the differences between people and how it all came to be. Also, he was still controller. He still kind of had a desk job. Then at the end of the 60s, he was promoted to director of programs, which made him responsible for the output on both BBC channels, and then he became the natural candidate for the position of Director General of the BBC. He could literally have been the head honcho, but at the same time, the very famous, world-famous series called Life on Earth, which is probably the defining natural history programme of our time, was being developed, and he wanted to present it. And he couldn't present it if he was Director General of the BBC, so he resigned his desk job, and he went freelance. And they re-employed him to present and work on Life on Earth.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's really good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's because that was his calling. That's what he always wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. And his leaving do sounds so nice as well. Fake Radio Times with him on every single programme. It's like, there's so much love for him, though.
Yeah.
It really came across.
Yeah. And I think just the fact that he's one of the world's nicest men probably means he isn't suited to be Director General of the BBC anyway.
No. Yeah, I mean, it gets to the point where it's really important that the sound's good as well, isn't it? And they're up a tree saying they got up 2 hours before dawn to film this bird, and then the bird appeared, and he was so excited. And then the sound man says, we can't use that footage because the sound is capturing your heartbeat because you're so excited, your heartbeat's louder than the bird. So the sound got too good.
There's a lot of actually what we haven't talked about. There's a lot of waiting around for the right moment and stuff. And then
tons of it.
When that moment comes, it really is just like, right, capture it now, and anything can go wrong.
Yeah. When they go to look for the kimono dragon. No, it's not Japanese.
It's a dragon in a kimono. Yeah, Komodo.
That's really exciting.
It was terrifying.
Yeah. I'm really sort of familiar with that now, but I guess then a lot of people didn't know there was a type of dragon in the world. It's that sort of thing.
And they had a goat carcass that they strung up on a tree and they waited for it to come.
Yeah. I picture them all stealthy in the undergrowth, waiting with the camera and everything, waiting. It came from behind them. They weren't expecting that, but they get the footage. And then I think they capture one, measure it, observe it, film it, and then let it go again. This is so good.
It's because this is when they're in Indonesia and they're also getting the orangutan. They'd heard that a poacher or something had killed the mum orangutan and was keeping the baby orangutan in a cage. So they went to see him and they managed to buy it off him. Now, they took that orangutan back to London Zoo, and he was the orangutan who started the family of orangutans in captivity at London Zoo. So that's kind of an example of how they helped
preserve a species.
Yeah. But at the same time, they found this Komodo dragon, and people were like, are you going to bring the Komodo dragon back to London Zoo? And they're like, not likely. Have you seen the size of
5
it?
foot.
9 foot.
9 foot?
Yeah. Which, by all accounts, is not that impressive for a Komodo dragon. They can get bigger.
Oh, right.
But it's a dinosaur, isn't it?
It is related, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing, but it does say the better the cameras get and the more they can film it, the more they revert to just capturing animals as they are and not taking them back, which is a massive progress.
Yeah. He also says in here about how sometimes they can contrive shots, especially with the paradise flying snake. Did you know there was such a thing as a flying snake?
No.
I'm never going to Southeastern Asia.
Yeah.
There's a flying snake. So anyway, they'd seen it flying in action, but they couldn't film it, so they had to try and contrive it. So they caught one.
Yeah.
They were climbing up a tree with it, trying to get it to fly, and in the end they got it doing it a little bit. Sometimes they said that to get that perfect shot, they do kind of interfere with it. I think nowadays, when I watch the programs, they're all shot so beautifully, and you're right, with all the technologies of drones and cameras the size of fingernails and stuff. I think more of the theatre of it, if you like, is in the editing. They don't seem to be interfering with it on a ground level like they used to, like try and get a snake to fly. But I think sometimes they kind of edit it to make it look more exciting, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I do.
Otherwise, it's just hours and hours of waiting for an animal to appear.
Yeah. Skip to today, as you say, the way it's filmed now, it's cinematically incredible. What they can show you underwater, and the music is so much part of it, the soundscape.
Yeah.
And I watched a whole documentary on Hans Zimmer. He gets the sounds they've recorded of the actual animals, and then the winds and things like that, tundra sounds and all the stuff they've captured, and just brings sort of light music and mixes it with the natural sound in the way that cinema does. So it's playing with your emotions, but also using the actual sound. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And the journey. So I guess this book kind of captures the journey of knowledge. This man's lifetime really charters massive changes in everything, in filming, in nature, in travel, in tourism, in what we've chopped down, the change of the environment, everything. It's really dramatic change.
Yeah. And it's just like politically and ecologically, he's so tuned in. And I really get that is from his experience of, I mean, what a life he's had. He's seen it all with his own eyes. What we're seeing through our TV screens, he's actually seen. So I get that somebody who's seen all of these rare species and stuff up close, how could you see that and not care about the future of the planet? How can you see all that and not want to tell everyone, hang on a minute, we've really got to do something here? I hope they listen to him. He's 97. He's not going to go on forever.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, there's basically, we're not going to tell every single story about every country they went to and what happened. But I really love the one where they want to go to try and find birds of paradise, but they found that the local tribes used all the feathers of these birds in their headdresses, and they used so many in each headdress. He calculated in this one big dance they were filming that there was 20,000 birds had died for this one tribal dance. And that's why they couldn't find any to film, because they almost made them extinct.
Wow. Because when you think about people lined up next to birds and animals, people are the least pretty species. Yeah. Everything else is so colourful and stuff, especially birds with all their feathers. I kind of get why somebody would look at a bird and be really jealous and think, I want those feathers on my head.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to take bits and fashion ourselves some fashion. Because our own selves are just
boring.
We're not decorated.
No, we're not. I tell you what else David Attenborough noticed quite quickly about the indigenous people who just live in different environments, was how they could spot an animal or a bird who was even camouflaged much quicker than David and his cameraman could. They were just attuned to seeing things and spotting things. I guess that's survival anyway, because they either need to hide from the animal or kill it and eat it. Yeah. So they were really attuned, but also not just visually, but they could hear stuff that David and his team couldn't hear. And there was also a bit where they seemed to preempt canoes coming down the river. And they'd say, there'll be a canoe in an hour. And David Attenborough's like, how the hell do they know? But it turns out the river meandered so much. Yeah. An hour before it came to the village, it was actually quite close on another piece of land. And they could hear the canoe on the river like an hour, and they knew in an hour's time it would arrive at the village.
Their animal instincts are more attuned because they're still closer to living like animals do in some ways. Loads of places where he went, in lands where we've gone and shot and killed and conquered, he talked his way, carefully with people to make them like him, and they ended up bringing him things. His
life and his cameraman's life was in danger. I don't think Attenborough really admitted that in the book, but reading between the lines a bit, I think he put himself in some really dangerous situations because all of these indigenous people basically hated white people.
They had every right to, and be afraid, and he always managed to ingratiate himself.
Yeah. It's because he's so good looking. So for one of the episodes of Life on Earth, they go to the gorillas, because obviously they're our nearest relatives with their opposable thumbs. And they go to Rwanda, which is where Diane Fossey is famous for Gorillas in the Mist.
Yes.
So she's this American woman who went over to protect gorillas from poachers and stuff. And she agrees to let Attenborough go in and film. But on the morning that they're due to go up there, her favourite gorilla, Digit, is killed by poachers. Yeah. She finds him with his head and his hands cut off.
That's horrible.
Because the hands are just made into ashtrays for tourists.
Oh, it's horrible.
It's just not even... Oh, God. I mean, how much do they get for those ashtrays? Oh, and they also say they come and take the young ones, but because gorillas will fight for the death to protect their children, they'll kill the adults. So they shoot like 10 adult gorillas, to just get 2 baby ones.
I-
Anyway, Diane Fossey is there stopping all of this happening. She's very ill as well. She's got pneumonia and she's up a mountain in the mist, gorillas in the mist. So she's just heard that her favourite gorilla has died. So she puts off David Attenborough. And then all of a sudden she says, no, come, actually, it's better that you film this.
important.
You let the whole world know what's going on. But her tactics to keep away the poachers, I mean, they're kind of unethical in themselves. It's a national park where she is in Rwanda, and there's an agreement that it's kept as it is. The forest is kept as it is so the gorillas can live in their own habitat. But apparently the farmers nearby are cutting down the trees and stuff because they want open pasture for their cattle. Diane Fossey goes and shoots the cattle in the back to maim them and stuff. So she's not really... I mean, she's so passionate about her
thing,
gorillas.
I love this animal, but I don't care about that animal.
Yeah. So, I mean, she's kind of a hero in some circles, but let's say she's a bit problematic.
Flawed.
Yeah. But she undoubtedly loved the gorillas.
Yeah.
And her whole reason for being on this earth is saving these gorillas.
Oh, well, it's so lovely, the encounter he has.
That's another famous encounter, isn't it? We all know that little bit of footage.
They didn't film it all.
Oh, I know.
Cutting.
Right? Yeah.
Because basically he put himself into their midst and to talk about them. And the cameraman was waiting for him to start talking, so he didn't press film. And the gorilla came right up to David Attenborough and put a paw on his head. He was like, this isn't the time to do my talk, actually.
The younger ones are coming and playing with him. I mean, they look
trying to get his
quite
shoes
strong.
off and stuff.
Yeah, it's iconic footage.
I was holding my breath reading it, thinking this is really scary. But he said he didn't feel scared at all.
Yeah.
He was just in awe.
I mean, I guess they were so used to humans because of Diane Fossey and stuff, and they could probably tell that he's not a poacher.
Yeah, right. He sat there.
He sat down. Yeah, and they've approached him.
And he knows the things to do, like bow your head and don't make eye contact, which is exactly the same, actually, with humans. Which is why people making eye contact with you, things like the tube, is extremely aggravating.
Yeah. What do gorillas do on the tube?
Well, it depends if they're aggressive or not.
There are things you
Human
definitely
behaviour,
don't do.
it's the same.
Yeah, 100%. No, I remember watching that footage and kind of thinking, oh, it's fun and charming, but also at the same time, you can see how strong those small gorillas are.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if one of them just wanted to turn, and they could rip David Attenborough's head off. But like you say, that actually, in real life, that happened a lot longer. It's just that the cameraman didn't have much film left.
Didn't have much film. They never seem to have much film.
And they wanted that perfect shot, so he had to wait until he thought David Attenborough was going to start talking.
Yeah.
Ah, darn it.
But he at least had that experience.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Diane Fossey got murdered. She was found in her room, like with the machete through her face or something. I mean, you can go over and conserve all of these animals, like the lionesses and the gorillas, but you are on somebody else's land, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you're on the animal's land. It's a dangerous job to do that.
It is.
There's over 20 species which have been named after David Attenborough.
What? So how do you differentiate them?
Because they all have different Latin names. Yeah, there's not like a armadillo walking around called David Attenborough.
David Attenborough, butterfly.
You see that flying tree snake?
Yeah.
David Attenborough. Even a dinosaur was named after him, and it is called the Attenboroughsaurus.
Excellent.
But he said that when he went to see it in the 1990s, the label on it was still the old name.
Label.
And she said there's a refurbishment coming up and we're going to change the label. In fact, we should go and see. Well, I wonder if that's in the Natural History Museum.
Do you know what? I just remembered the time where I feel like I met him, but I didn't. Because I went in is it the British Museum, I think it is, where you can go in a 3D experience of going under the water.
Okay.
And you go in but all you've got is those 3D glasses.
Virtual reality.
Virtual reality glasses thing. So you all sit in this room, you put these glasses on, and you're in a pod that's going under the water. And David Attenborough sat behind you, and if you turn your head round, there he is. And because you can move your head and look around, you can look above, below, and behind you is David Attenborough talking in this pod. It's brilliant.
So
I've been underwater with David Attenborough. Virtually.
You virtually met him.
Yes. Anyone could do that. I'm sure it's still on.
That's kind of it, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the book concludes with his wife dying, which is absolutely tragic. In 1998, they've been together. They've been married for 47 years.
Yeah.
That's where he ends the book. But we all know that he carried on and on and on and just got more and more magnificent in his work, in his personality.
Don't you find it amazing, like his amazing voice that we all know and love?
Yeah.
When Life on Earth was first sold to America, they wanted to get Robert Redford in to do the narration.
'Cause I didn't think they'd understand him. I can understand if people don't understand me, but not David Attenborough. He speaks the Queen's English properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank God he fought for that. He actually fought for that. And so that's made him a legend there.
Yeah.
If they use someone else's voice, it'd be a disaster for his career.
So I love David Attenborough.
Me too.
Yeah, everyone loves David Attenborough.
Yeah.
If somebody didn't like him, then I wouldn't like them.
Yes.
Because there's no reason not to like him.
Yeah. Well, he'd be highly suspicious of their
Yeah.
motives. He's really been a godfather figure, but not in the violent sense.
Yes.
He's a peaceful godfather.
Yeah, the animal-loving godfather. He wouldn't cut off a horse's
He
head
puts
and put it in
horses'
your
heads
bed.
back on.
Talking of horses, when he filmed the Queen's speech.
Yeah, that's really good, that. Yeah, they got him in to do the Christmas Queen's speech.
Yeah. They were filming it, and she, ever the professional,
Well,
go
he
on.
suggested that they take it away from the desk and they make it a bit more interesting. So they got her walking along past her horses, the stables, whilst talking. And then she stopped and carried on talking. But the horse in the background, it says like one of those classic horse twitches where the nose is itchy, so their mouth's all going round and round. And when they looked back, because it's right there in the background, it looks like the horse is talking the Queen's speech. So they had to ask her to do it
again, which she did.
And then the palace got in touch and asked for the first take.
Yeah, she wanted to see
They
it.
said, "Oh no, it didn't. It went wrong." And they said, "We've heard a rumour of why it went wrong. The Queen wants to see it. She thinks it's funny." And then the second year they did the Queen's speech, she'd put forward an outfit that she proposed to wear. It was green, but it's the same colour of the walls they were going to film in. So he'd had to get back to the palace and said, "Please, could she wear any other colour except green?" And when she turned up, she was livid.
Yeah, she wanted to wear her green.
Yes, what was wrong with my green outfit? And he was like, "Very sorry, Your Majesty, the same colour of the walls." But she was still angry.
Yeah, they put her in mushroom, that's why.
Oh.
A mushroom-coloured.
Wow.
And apparently, the reason why she always dressed in such bright colours, because that's what she's known for, those amazing hats.
So she stands out.
So she stands out, and
I
you
knew
know
that.
who the Queen is, really.
I've always known that. It's really, really good. It's very clever. And that's the classic case of what you were saying. We didn't get decorated brightly as human beings.
Yeah, so
We
she's
have
the
to
Queen.
decorate
so-
ourselves.
But it's quite dangerous in terms of like assassinations
Well,
and
yeah,
stuff.
you're not going to blend into the crowd because of that if you're the Queen.
With your crown on.
Yeah. She never wears the crown. You know that crown is only worn at the coronation and never again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that crown hadn't been worn since the Queen wore it until Prince Charles put it on his head, and then it'll never be worn again.
Oh,
it goes
my
into the
goodness.
crown jewel box at the Tower of London.
Stolen from India.
Is it?
Dunno. Probably. They stole everything else. When the Queen died, we should have crowned David Attenborough as the King of England.
The good thing about him is he's a living legend in his lifetime. He knows how loved he is and appreciated he is.
Yeah. I hope he's all right now. We don't hear a lot about him these days.
Well, it wasn't that many years ago that he got a Lifetime Achievement Award. He made a massive speech about the world. I bet he gets loads of that stuff happen to him. That's his life, receiving awards and speeches. And
I know. Look, we've dedicated a whole podcast to him.
he
I mean,
deserves it.
What an accolade.
Yeah, and I guess what we should do is learn something from him. This book really doesn't talk much about the environment going to pot, though, does it?
No, but in as much as the book is about the natural world and
Yeah,
stuff.
it almost is the prelude to the downfall because it makes you really care and love and understand the world and all of its amazingness. Even a leaf that opens at a certain time or butterflies, everything. It makes you in awe of the world. And the natural next thing to do is care about its demise. Yeah. This book doesn't cover that. It covers the rise and rise of loving the world.
And how precious it all is. And how amazingly beautiful and fascinating it all is.
And how violent.
And how different. Well, that's part of it, yeah.
Really warped and dark. It is all part of it.
So I would just reiterate what I said at the beginning of this podcast, that you should read this book, actually, because it's first-hand accounts from David Attenborough, the man himself, about going to all of these countries and how he got this footage, how he tracked all of these animals down, and just how he never loses his appreciation of it. It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah. He gets so excited about all of these things. A leaf, a fish, a monkey, a butterfly, a fossil, a human nature. He's so excited about everything, it rubs off on you, doesn't it?
Yeah. So read this book. I found mine in the charity shop for £1.50. There's probably a few more somewhere.
Plus, he did it all so we don't have to, because actually he got bitten.
Oh,
He
yes.
got bitten.
Yeah.
Every single country bites you.
Yes. Yes, if it's not ants, it's cockroaches, it's...
So actually, he travelled so we don't have to.
So we don't have to get bitten.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Thrift Shop Biography. We love making this podcast and we're absolutely thrilled that so many of you are already listening. We're new to this and you could really help us out by leaving us a review somewhere, wherever you listen to this podcast. And if you could share us, tell your friends about us or drop some links on social media. We have a Facebook page called Thrift Shop Biography, so make sure you come over there to hear about the episodes first and what else we're up to. Okay, see you next week. And if you're new here, there are loads more episodes now to go and listen in the back catalogue, so make sure you go and enjoy them. Okay, thank you very much.